Alrighty guys, Imavov versus Baralho starts tomorrow, and today I'm going to be running predictions for this fight card, starting with the prelims, ending all the way up to the main event fight. So if you enjoy this video at all, definitely be sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below what videos you want to see from this channel next regarding UFC or MMA at all. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the first fight. Now, kicking things off with the strawweight fight against Shauna Bannon and Sam Hughes. Now, the thing you'll notice about Shauna Bannon is that she is a very, very explosive fighter. She's got explosive striking, resilience, and submissions, and I feel like her recovery too is also pretty solid, considering the fact that she managed to recover from a head kick against Pual Tomar and get a second round armbar win against her. So I feel like that's definitely going to give her an upper leg in this fight, you know, her explosiveness and all that. Now, Sam Hughes, she's not like Shauna Bannon at all in the fact that Shauna Bannon is a fighter that is focused on those high explosive output knockouts with early submission threats, whereas Sam Hughes, she is a fighter who is consistent at going the full distance. She is more controlled on the striking game, and she is less focused about, getting those finishes and just surviving the latter rounds until she could potentially win via decision, and she is good at that. Now, Shauna, obviously an absolute menace in the early rounds, whereas Sam Hughes, she wants to drag this fight on, and to me, I personally feel like that will be the case, so I'm gonna have to go with Sam Hughes via decision. She has a patient, well-rounded game, and her experience against versatile opponents could potentially negate the power and strategy that Bannon has against her. Now, Bannon can definitely win this fight. I'm not saying that it's impossible for her. She could definitely land good strikes in the early rounds or turn the tide with a submission to win the fight. I'm not saying that she can't win, but I feel like when it comes to how well-rounded, how patient Sam Hughes is, I definitely feel like she could drag this fight out and get the win, considering the fact that she's done it with very versatile opponents in the past. All right, and for our next fight, we have Brad Tavares versus Robert Bursak. Now, Brad Tavares being a 3-1 favorite is something that I can see. He's been a fighter who has been around forever, but the only problem is that he is obviously getting old. You know, he's 37, which is basically 97 in the cage, so I definitely feel like his age will play a factor against Robert Bursak. Now, obviously, being a little bit older doesn't mean that you're going to lose a fight, especially when it comes to somebody like Tavares, who is a great striker and is a guy who's basically just all up in your face. The only thing that I'm saying is that with age, he's obviously going to be much more slower, and I feel like that's definitely going to be a factor going into this fight. Now, on to Robert Bursak, who is less of an MMA fighter and more so of a boxer. That's basically his bread and butter. He's a very light on the feet guy, and I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot of jabs from him. He's going to be going into this fight with his boxing game, and he has pretty solid takedown defense, but I feel like he can definitely be taken down if push comes to shove. And Brad Tavares as a whole, he is more experienced in MMA, like mixed martial arts in the UFC, than Robert Bursak, because Robert is more so of a striker. But I feel like, considering the fact that we've seen Brad Tavares get slept before and he's just not the same fighter, I'm gonna have to go with Robert Bursak. And again, this is one of those fights where it's pretty difficult to call, and it's one of those things where realistically anything can happen. Robert Bursak could sleep Brad Tavares, or Brad Tavares could grind down Bursak for a decision win. Either one of those things could happen. And I know to some people that this may be considered an odd call, considering the fact that Tavares is more diverse in the MMA scene, and Robert Bursak did have a pretty humiliating loss to Ihor Peteria last year, but I feel like I just have to play it safe and put my monopoly money on Robert Bursak. I feel like he could definitely put Brad Tavares to sleep if he wanted to, and I'm just gonna have to play it safe. I just have to go with Robert Bursak, and we're gonna move on to the next fight. Also, I know that I probably butchered Robert's last name like 30 times during this segment, but you guys are just going to have to forgive me, okay? Don't type it out in the comment sections. I know I did what I did, but we're just going to move past this and go on to the next fight. Is that cool? Cool. Okay. And next up on our fight card, we have Sam Patterson going up against Trey Waters. Now, obviously, the thing that is in common with both of these guys is that they are very lanky fighters, but they're definitely different in the sense that Sam, he's got great Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he wants to take this fight to the ground. He's got great submission game, and I feel like his boxing has also improved as well. And Trey definitely does not want to take this fight to the ground. He is a guy who wants to just stand and bang, and he has pretty solid takedown defense, so it'd be pretty interesting to see if Sam could take him down. I personally believe that he could, But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this fight plays out. Now, the main problem with Patterson is that his chin is always in the air, which is definitely a concern that could definitely lead to him getting knocked down or just knocked out in general. And the problem is for Trey is that he has faced a lot of very low level competition. And not to say that he's a bad fighter, but when you take a look at Sam Patterson, who had a pretty amazing knockout victory against an undefeated Danny Barlow, who was a pretty solid striker, I'm just gonna have to go with Sam Patterson. And I feel like he's going to get this fight done via submission. He's got very great BJJ, like I said before, and his submission game, considering the fact that he's very lanky, I feel like he's just going to activate his stretch Armstrong abilities and just wrap up Trey Waters and just get the submission win over him. And in my eyes, if this is a stand and bang fight, I feel like it could go either way in my eyes. I feel like Trey could definitely land some good strikes and Sam could land some good strikes. But if it ends up going down the MMA route and we see a mixture of striking and grappling, I feel like Trey Walters just won't be able to hold up. I feel like his takedown defense will not be able to hold up against somebody like Sam Patterson. And I'm just going to have to give Sam Patterson the submission win, and we'll be on to the next fight. And next fight, we head over to the featherweight division, where William Gomez will be going up against Robert Ruchala, who will be making his UFC debut. We have a lot of debuts on this card, ladies and gentlemen. Now, both of these fighters were very successful in the regional scene. Robert Ruchala, obviously KSW champion, making his UFC debut on this card. Now, William Gomez is a very great kickboxer. He's a very technical fighter, but he's not really good with grappling, which I feel like Robert Ruchala, he could definitely exploit that in a way, because when Ruchala goes for those takedowns, he does a great job at just getting in there, just running for the takedown. But the only downside to Robert is that despite being a very entertaining fighter, he'll jump, he'll spin, he'll do whatever. He is definitely a very hittable guy, which I feel like William could definitely take advantage of in this fight. And I don't feel like this fight is going to be one-sided. I definitely expect Ruchala to apply some pressure when need be to Gomez, but I feel like I'm just going to have to go with Gomez by a decision. I definitely feel like he's definitely going to be able to pick apart Ruchala on the feet, and Ruchala, definitely a very talented fighter, more talented than most of the guys we see in the KSW coming over to the UFC, but I feel like it just won't be enough. I feel like this is a very bad stylistic matchup for Ruchala, and I'm just going to have to give the win to William Gomez, and we're going to move on to the next fight. And next up on the fight card, we got Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Andreas Gustafsson. Now, Rinat, he's a great fighter. He's a takedown guy. He had a lot of success in the regional scene. Pretty sure he ended up becoming a champion. And then you got Gustafsson, who was pretty successful in the regional scene too. And when you take a look at what he's been doing in the UFC, he's basically a Swedish Marab, in my opinion. He's reckless in a good way. He'll rough you up in the clinch and the grappling, and he's got really great stamina too. Overall, just a very impressive, aggressive fighter. And when you take a look at his win against Chaos Williams, which that's not a very easy fighter to beat. He's got great striking game, great knockout power as well. And Gustafsson managed to just go in there and wipe the floor with him. He mauled him. And when you take a look at the gas tank of each one of these fighters, Fakhretdinov just does not have the same gas tank as Gustafsson, and I'm gonna have to give this fight to Gustafsson via decision. Like, realistically, I cannot see a world where Fakhretdinov is the dominant one in this fight. I really think the only reason why people would bet on him is for his record, which is 24-2. That's very impressive, don't get me wrong, but it's not really as impressive as most people make it out to be when the guy just barely beats fighters and just squeaks by with a decision win. He's also just a takedown spammer that doesn't necessarily have much submission threat to him. He's a fighter that we have definitely seen in trouble, whether it's he gets knocked down and continues wrestling. I feel like Gustafsson is just going to be aggressive. He's not going to allow this guy to get any breathing room. He's just going to continue marching forward, and I'm just going to have to give the win to him. And next up, we got Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delija for the heavyweight fight. I think that this will be a pretty interesting fight, considering the fact that these guys have obviously already fought before, and Tybura was the one that came out on top, but also considering the fact that Tybura lost to Tom Aspinall, and now Delija is training partners with Tom Aspinall. So I definitely think that's interesting. I think Tom Aspinall will definitely be training up this guy like a Shaolin monk. Tom Aspinall's in a secret dojo in Salford. Delija's right by his side. Listen, Marcin. In order to defeat your enemy, you're gonna have to become your enemy. And you know what this means, man. You're gonna have to get in there and you just have to go after them, man. You're just gonna have to go in guns blazing, man. You gotta show them no mercy. I'm sorry. I know I'm getting sidetracked. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that Ante was 35 years old, I definitely feel like he could be the star power that the UFC heavyweight division needs right now, and I feel like it's a perfect matchup for somebody like Tybura, considering the fact that while he is pretty good at fighting prospects and winning, he's not enough for top contenders right now. I feel like this fight is personally right up Tybura's alley because Ante, no disrespect to him, he's not a big contender. He's not the rising star in the heavyweight division. He's not going to come by and bring back the heavyweight division from the dirt. That's not going to happen. I definitely do think that this will be an entertaining fight. Don't get me wrong. I feel like Ante will bring the striking game, and I feel like Tybura could also respond with, maybe a few takedowns, maybe a few good answered strikes. But, I'm just going to have to give this win to Tybura via decision. Short, sweet, to the point. Tybura is one of those fighters where he's a great journeyman. He can't necessarily bring the fight to top competitors, and Ante, unfortunately, is not one of those top competitors. And maybe he could prove me wrong, and maybe he's the next Derek Lewis, except he's actually going to win a championship. I don't know. Maybe he's got crazy knockout power, and we just don't know about it. But until then, I'm going to just stick with Tybura because, he won the first fight. And unless, Ante pulls out like a My Hero Academia play and eats some of Tom Aspinall's hair to gain his powers, then maybe he's got a chance. But until then, I just gotta stick with Tybura, and we're gonna move on to the next fight. Now, this next fight was just made aware to me because apparently Faraz Ziam was forced to withdraw from this fight due to some family issues. So Harry Hardwick will be taking his replacement. So it'll be Harry Hardwick going up against Kale Fernandez. Now, from what I do know about Harry Hardwick, I don't know much about the guy. I don't have much information about the guy. I literally had to do research about the guy just now because I didn't even know who the guy was. Like, I'm literally looking up clutchpoints.com, seeing that this guy is now in the fight against Kale Fernandez. And to be honest, from what I'm seeing about this guy, he does seem like a pretty well-rounded, versatile fighter, but he doesn't necessarily seem like he has enough power to beat Fernandez. So I'm gonna have to give the fight to Fernandez, honestly, just based off of the fact that I don't necessarily know much about the guy, and I want to get this video out as soon as possible, so I'm not gonna bother doing 2 hours worth of research for like one guy in a fight that he was literally just put in. I'm sorry, you guys can bash me in the comments, say that I'm a terrible YouTuber and that I should be boycotted off the face of the earth, but I'm sorry. I'm just going to give the win to Fernandez and move on. And next fight, we got Omar Sy versus Brenson Ribeiro. I know a lot of people have criticisms towards Sy, claiming that he's a boring fighter, and to a certain extent, that could be true, especially if you watch his fight with Alonzo. Like, I'd probably watch Adesanya versus Romero over that fight. Okay, maybe not that far, but overall, in my eyes, Sy, he's a pretty average fighter. He's got decent grappling, I'll give him that, and his striking, he's a very technical striker. I will also give him that. I feel like Sy's striking will go well against Ribeiro, who is a guy who is very hesitant on the feet. I'd say that most of his losses come from pretty competent strikers. Some examples could include when he lost to Mirzakhanov at UFC 316, and when he lost to Jean Mignon at UFC 298. And as much as I think that Sy is not necessarily an entertaining fighter by any means, he's got good striking, and I feel like that's enough. I'm just gonna have to give the decision win to Omar Sy. Ribeiro's just not much of a striker. If anything, I'd say that his grappling game is better than his striking game, but even then, that's not much of a compliment. It's not necessarily elite, it's just good. So that's probably his saving grace, is his grappling game, but other than that, Omar Sy, he definitely decimate Ribeiro on the feet. He chip away at him until he gets that decision win. And now we're going to finally move on to the first main card fight. We've gone through all the prelims. Thank God. Time to move on to the main card fights, ladies and gentlemen. And next up, we got Mr. Worldwide Patricia Pitbull going up against Losine Kaida. Now, Pitbull was obviously very successful in Bellator. He ended up becoming a multiple-time Bellator champion, and in my mind, cemented himself as the GOAT of Bellator. And Kaida himself was also pretty successful in the regional scene, not to the same extent as Pitbull, but, you know, he's an Octagon champ, definitely one of, if not the GOATs of Octagon. And Kaida, or Kaida, which I'm apparently just now learning is how you're actually supposed to pronounce his name. I've been butchering the names of a lot of these fighters, and it's starting to piss me off. Anyways, Kaida, in my mind, he's definitely able to go into this fight and defeat somebody like Pitbull. And Pitbull is a great fighter, but he's just looking very washed these days. He doesn't have the same, you know, exciting grappling and striking that we've been seeing from him. He hasn't necessarily been looking good in the UFC as of recently. And when you take a look at somebody like Kaida, who is an amazing striker who just wants to end this fight early, I'm going to have to go with Kaida getting it done by KO or TKO. Preferably in either round 1 or round 2. Now, is there a possibility that Pitbull could win this fight? Yeah, it's possible, but I mean, it's just probably not going to happen. The guy's looking washed, and if this somehow does happen, I definitely expect a video from Tony Has Died saying this is not a meme. Kaida has died. I definitely expect that. But yeah, Kaida, just an amazing striker, has pretty solid takedown defense and great cardio. I'm just going to have to give it to Kaida on this one. I don't expect Pitbull to win this. He's just not the same fighter as he used to be. He was great in Bellator, not in the UFC anymore. I'm sorry, man. We're just going to have to give the win to Kaida, and we're just going to move on to the next fight. The next fight, we got Balaji Oki. I'm very sorry if I'm butchering that name. I've been butchering a lot of these fighters' names. So we got Oki versus Mason Jones. Now, Mason Jones is a very interesting guy. He ended up having a undefeated run in the regional scene, becoming Cage Warriors champ in the process, and then he went over to the UFC and didn't necessarily have the best of time there, and he ends up getting cut from the UFC. He goes back to the regional scene, starts getting some fights won, and he ends up fighting none other than Jeremy Stephens, and he gets the win against him. And Balaji Oki also had a pretty good run in the regional scene. He also ended up becoming champion. He got a finish on Dana White's Contender Series, and he is currently 2-1 in the UFC. Now, Balaji Oki, he is a pretty good striker. He is definitely wanting to put the pressure on Jones, but the thing is that Balaji Oki, his grappling sucks. It's not really all that good, and that's very bad news for him considering the fact that he's going up against Mason Jones, who is a very good wrestler. No doubt in my mind, he wants to make this a ground fight. He's a great grappler. He wants to go for the submissions, and he's also a pretty fun striker too, but the only problem with that is that he is definitely very hittable, so I feel like we're going to see a lot of grappling from Mason Jones in this fight, and I'm going to have to give it to Mason Jones via decision. Because once again, like I said before, Balaji Oki, he does not have good grappling, and I feel like Mason Jones is going to be going for a lot more grappling. When it comes down to striking, I feel like Balaji definitely has the upper hand considering the fact that Mason Jones is just more hittable than him. But if this fight ends up going to the ground, which I'm almost positive that it will, we saw this in his fight against Jeremy Stephens where he essentially grappled Jeremy in the 3rd round to save his UFC contract, and it definitely paid off because, he's got a fight on this card against Balaji Oki, who I definitely feel like he can take, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next fight. And next fight, we got Modestas Bukauskas versus Paul Craig. Paul Craig is a submission artist. In the regional scene, he had a 100% finish rate. He ended up becoming champion, and he had a pretty solid run in the UFC, managing to get a submission win over none other than Ankalaev himself. I'm sorry to glaze here, but that fight was just, it was just incredible. The last second triangle choke, brother, you can't make this shit up. And I've also got exceptional bias for this guy because, he's Scottish and I have Scottish ancestry. So, it's just an ancestral thing. What can I say? But even I, among the many Paul Craig glazers out there, can say that he has not been improving ever since his downfall in the UFC. It's very unfortunate to see, but he just isn't really good anywhere on the feet. He's just really only good at BJJ. That's really the only thing that I can give him in this fight, especially when he's going up against Bukauskas, who has pretty solid power on the feet, and he also has pretty solid takedown defense as well. It's not looking good for Paul Craig in this fight, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, I know my Scottish ancestors are going to be upset with me, but I have to get my money on this parlay. I have to go ahead and go with Modestas Bukauskas getting this fight done via decision. And as much as I pray that Paul Craig does the classic trick of making his opponents fall into the triangle, I don't think that it's going to work this time around with Modestas Bukauskas. Paul Craig is not improving. His downfall in the UFC has been very imminent for a while, I think, and Modestas Bukauskas, he's just going to get the decision win. I'm sorry, Paul. I love you. I definitely will be cheering for you, but just to play it safe, I'm just going to have to go with Modestas Bukauskas getting it done via decision. And we're just going to move on to the next fight. Next up, we got Benoit Saint Denis versus Mauricio Rufy. Oh my God. I only have 2 more fights to go. I want this video to be done so bad. Now, no debate in my mind that this is going to be an exciting fight. This fight, in my mind, it's going to be absolute cinema. If anything, it's probably going to be more exciting than Nimavov versus Braho. There, I said it. I mean, you got somebody like Benoit, a former Marines officer in France. He had an incredible run in the regional scene, going undefeated with a 100% finish rate. And despite going through some setbacks in the UFC, I believe that the God of War, this is his time. This is his moment to where he can bounce back. And he's fighting somebody like Mauricio, who is an elite and accurate striker. He's just a wild guy. He just throws shit to the wall and it sticks, and I think that this is going to be a great fight for the God of War. These two are definitely very solid competitors, but ultimately there can only be one winner at the end of the day, and it's got to be the fighting nerd Mauricio Rufy by first round knockout. And you definitely know I'm serious about this when I'm putting the round in the predictions, because if you notice so far I haven't put the round in the predictions because I'm low-key dog shit at that. But I'm definitely serious about this one. Mauricio Rufy is an incredible range fighter, and I definitely feel like that's going to be canceling Benoit's ground plans for this fight. Mauricio, he's going to go in there, he's going to start this fight on the feet, and he's not going to end it until one of them are on their ass. And Benoit, he's not as careful. He's very reckless when he's going forward, and I definitely feel like that's going to get him caught against somebody like Mauricio Rufy. And especially when you take into account that it's not all that difficult to tag somebody and knock out somebody like Benoit Saint Denis. So yeah, Mauricio Rufy, he's gonna get the first round knockout or second round knockout. I don't know. I'm very bad at predicting that shit. But yeah, Rufy gets the win over Benoit Saint Denis, and we're gonna move on to the next fight. This is the last fight before the main event. Now, next fight, we got Axel Sola versus Rhys McKee. Okay, guys, I'm low-key gonna be dead-ass with you right now. I had no idea this fight was even going on. I thought it was just going to be Nassourdine Imavov and Kyle Barajo, and then I was gonna be done. But no, this fight just happened to show up, and... Fine. Okay. Yeah, I just wasted an hour of my life doing research on these guys, by the way. You're welcome. Now, Mr. McKee has not been treated so well in the Ultimate Fighter Championship. He is currently 1-4 following his most recent win over David Frunza in the UFC. He has a heavy reliance on striking. He's got a high KO/TKO rate, and there's potential that he could definitely add another KO to his list. Sola, on the other hand, is less focused on striking, as he is definitely more balanced than McKee, and his southpaw stance and his varied record, 50% KO/TKO, 10% via submissions, that could definitely throw off McKee's rhythm in this fight. Sola, in my mind, is banking on regional confidence, but I feel like this could be a problem for him as he's stepping into the UFC, and he's definitely going to face a steep adjustment curve in this fight. But I don't necessarily think that's going to be much of a problem, especially when he's fighting McKee out of all people. So I have to give this win to Axel Sola. I feel like he's definitely going to add another win to his undefeated streak. He's going to continue to ride out the undefeated regional resume hype wave when he steps into this fight. And overall, well, I don't have anything to say. I'm just going to get onto the main event. I want this video to be done so bad. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are finally ready for the main event fight. Nassourdine Imavov versus Caio Barajo. Now, Nassourdine Imavov, arguably one of the most technically sound strikers in the middleweight division. He likes to rough people up, and he definitely hits hard, as we saw with his fight against Adesanya. And Caio Barajo is definitely a very balanced fighter. He's got a solid wrestling base, and his striking game is also improving as well. And he also had a dogfight with Cannonier and managed to go the full distance, showing to me how his stamina and his pace is really good and will definitely play out well in this fight against Imavov. But this is definitely a very tough fight to call. It's very 50-50 across the board. You got one of the most elite fighting nerds in the UFC going up against Imavov, and this fight is definitely going to be a war in the cage, but ultimately there can only be one winner, and that winner, in my eyes, is Caio Barajo by decision. And again, this is a very, very tough one to call. I ultimately just feel like this is a gut feeling. I mean, you got a guy who definitely is more well-rounded than Imavov, in my opinion. Barajo is not going to be flashy in this fight. He's just going to go in there with the takedowns and overwhelm Imavov. But if the fight ends in a finish, it's definitely going to have to be from Nassourdine Imavov. He's just got great striking, and I feel like he could definitely put down Caio Barajo if need be. But I feel like when you take into account that Barajo just has great stamina and pace, he's got a lot left in the gas tank despite being out for a year. And considering the fact that he grappled pretty well against Brendan Allen, I just have to pick Caio Barajo getting this fight done by decision and winning the main fight. Oh my gosh. It's finally over. 23 minutes of UFC predictions, and you're definitely going to see a lot more of them from me, assuming if I can get them out on time. Definitely be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, or if you had anything you wanted to leave about my predictions in the comments. Definitely be sure to let me know. I read every single comment, or the 0 comments that I've gotten so far on my YouTube channel. Anyways, my name is Insomnia MMA. I'm going to take a long ass nap, and I hope you guys have a good day or night, and peace out.